Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for November 14th. Well, here we are, fast approaching mid-November, and there are no tropical cyclones active throughout the world today. As we enter day 317 of 2021, the year is slowly coming with 87 storms so far this worldwide season. Of course, that is 5 away from the average of 92. In the Atlantic, it's day 166 of Atlantic hurricane season, and there is nothing active. The season does end in 16 days here, so as long as everything remains quiet, that would definitely be good news, and nothing is of course expected in the next 5 days here. In the Eastern Pacific, it's the same story over here as we enter day 182 of the season. There are no systems active. The season also ends in 14 days here. Of course, 14 days means 14 days until the end of our routine tropical weather bulletins. Probably going to make a few people upset, but that's just the nature of life. In the Western Pacific, we have an area of interest that still persists with a 10% chance of formation, the GFS being heavily consistent as they don't know whether it's going to be anywhere between a tropical depression and a Category 3. But it is probably not going to be doing much in the next few days at the very least. In the North Indian Ocean, we have 2 areas of interest, the first one being Invest 92b, which is continuing to enter into the Bay of Bengal, has a 40% chance of formation as it moves west-northwest, could become a weak tropical system. There's also an Arabian Sea area of interest that has a 10% chance of formation, but that really isn't a big concern at the moment. There is no track forecast at the moment, but if you do want a general outline of what 92b is going to be doing, it is expected to head west-northwest, and it should be near the 15-degree north latitude line, or slightly more north by the time it does make landfall in about 5 days. So until then, it's got a bit to do. IMD, the last I checked, was giving this a high chance of formation. We don't have that evidence here, so of course we do look at the formation chances from models. So here we are with the Atlantic, and it's pretty much an empty basin here with 2 frontal systems that are pretty much expanding and taking up all the activity, given the fact that they are part of large extratropical lows. Of course, that large extratropical low that you see exiting the screen was what used to be 96L absorbed. In the Eastern Pacific, it is similarly dead. The only thing really to note is some random cloud that exists several hundred miles, possibly 1,000 away from the Mexican coastline, and that isn't going to be doing anything obviously, so that's really not anything to note there. In the Western Pacific, you can hardly see that area of interest that we're going to be watching the next several days, so really it's just an empty basin here, completely devoid of much of activity at all. It's been a quiet season, not really much has gone on for what we typically see as the most dangerous time of the year, so that is good news for the Philippines and Japan and Taiwan, so let's hope this trend does of course continue as we head towards the end of the year here. In the North Indian Ocean, you can kind of see what's going on with 92b as it looks a little bit elongated. Well, not a little bit, quite elongated. But it is expected to move more into the water where it won't be dealing with so much of an interaction, and that is where those chances of development will probably happen. You can see it on satellite imagery. Looks like convection has somewhat vanished over the last several hours here, but it's probably going to be coming back eventually. We'll be watching to see what goes on here. Models have been dropping a little bit in terms of the strength of this, which is good, but regardless, we still could be looking at a weak tropical storm. In the Eastern Pacific, here are the sea surface temperatures, around 27 to 28 throughout much of the basin as they continue to cool. Much of those 28 to 29s have practically dropped in terms of the coverage. In the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico continues to cool, while the Caribbean and main development regions still have areas that are around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius. The Gulf Stream, of course, continuing to cool as well, with more areas seeing only 26 to 27, and the subtropics are getting cooler as well as we progressively get closer to the end of the season. In the North Indian Ocean, temperatures remain around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius, with some areas near 29. In the Arabian Sea, same story here, around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. In the Western Pacific, it's around 28 to 29 throughout much of the basin, with some of areas being 30 as you get closer to the equator. The southern hemisphere is still getting progressively warmer as we get closer to the time we start to see some cyclone development here, and there are ensembles that are trying to get that season started soon, so we'll see if that will come to fruition or not. But in the meantime, here are the sea surface temperature anomalies. That La Nina continuing to progress. Of course, that got upgraded to a La Nina alert not too long ago. Atlantic still looking above average except for areas near the Gulf Stream. The Eastern Pacific, it's looking a little bit more below average than it used to. Central Pacific, similarly below average. Western Pacific and North Indian Ocean looking slightly to near above average. On this day in 2020, of course, a year that we definitely want to forget off our minds, and a much different picture. Typhoon Vamco was a Category 4 and about to make landfall in Vietnam. Vamco, of course, would weaken significantly before making landfall as a Category 1 in Vietnam, but it did get known for its impacts in the Philippines, where it saw the worst flooding since Quetzana in 2009. Tropical Storm Theta was also active along with Iota, which would eventually become a high-end Category 4 hurricane, making landfall in Nicaragua at that intensity with the Category 4 land. Very, very serious events that happened on this day. Thankfully, we're not seeing that again this year. That brings us over to the next names. In the Atlantic, we're looking out for Adria and Braylon if any more storms form. Similarly, if anything else forms in the Eastern Pacific, it will get the name of Vivian. And in the Central Pacific, while Disney Plus announced a whole bunch of shows coming to the platform soon, they did not announce anything about Hone Plus. In the Western Pacific, we're looking out for Nieto and Ray, and in the North Indian Ocean, we're looking out for Jawad and Asani. Moving on over into the Southern Hemisphere, specifically the Southwestern Indian Ocean, the next two names here are Anna followed by Betsy Ray. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby, and in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cody. We'll be back from the Truck Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.